Here we are again for another episode of the Healthy Reset. So, welcome back. This is where menopause matters. Right. So tonight we're supposed to be having Cindy Olson or as guest speaker, and just waiting for her to catch on to us. But in the meantime, let's dive into another topic that's related to menopause. So, quick question. Do you ever feel like work and personal life have started to become blurred together, leaving you exhausted, stressed, and drained? If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. But what if you could set boundaries to protect your time, energy, and well being without feeling guilty? In today's episode is all about reclaiming balance by setting clear boundaries between work and personal life. And trust me, by the end of this live YouTube session, you'll have an actionable strategy to make it happen for you. Now, if you're joining us live or you're watching the recording, let's get into it. The good news, people just like you have already made these changes and see dramatic improvements in their health, energy, and peace of mind. But here's the real deal. You want to stay till the end because we're saving our most powerful boundary setting tips for the last part of this session. If you're ready to take control of your time and restore balance, this is the life you don't want to miss. So get comfortable and get ready to hit reset on your work-life balance at the Healthy Reset. Now, many of you might think, but what does this have to do with menopause? Here's the thing. Menopause is a form of burnout. And that's what we're going to get into tonight, how to reduce our burnout and create a good work-life balance. So, so any of you are struggling with your work-life balance, you're trying to get things in place, give me a thumbs up if you are. All right, I see a few thumbs up popping up here, so great. Now, I know on the YouTube channel, you probably can't give me a thumbs up, but go and leave a comment in the chat and we'll see if we can respond to that for you. All right. So imagine it's 8 p.m. and you're finally having dinner with your family after a long day. Then you hear the ping of a new work email. You think, I'll just check it quickly. And before you know it, you're responding to a chain of messages until 9:30 p.m. The evening you had reserved for relaxing has turned into an extension of your workday. So today, I can give you another example of this. Today, Maria is not coming on to do the interview and she's not showing up on camera because she had a fairly rough day. So right within our own community, we struggle with maintaining that work-life balance. Maria had a really rough day, and when she came home, she was extremely tired and said, okay, you know what? I'm going to sit on this one. I'm going to sit there and listen. And as much as I can, I'll respond to questions as they come up. Right? So if this scenario resonates with you, this is a very common scenario. And research has shown that 77% of professionals experience burnout due to blurred boundaries between work and personal life. And establishing and maintaining these boundaries is crucial for your mental well-being, productivity, and job satisfaction. So yes, setting boundaries is important. In my personal life, I had to learn the art of setting boundaries because without them, I realized I was constantly overwhelmed and trying to keep up. So today, we'll discuss boundaries. One sec, folks. I just shrinking one of my screens. So, today's purpose is how to set a healthy work-life boundaries, explore common challenges faced by all employees, managers, and leaders in their field, and create a personal action plan for you to take back to your workplace. Now, if you're going through menopause or going through that midlife change, this becomes vitally important because spending time with your family is the most important thing you can do. A little sad story is today, if nobody in this community doesn't know, I'm real beach bum. I'm always on the beach. I'm always on the beach with my family. We try to go every weekend if possible. And one of the beach activities I do is kite surfing. And just today, one of the guys who was one of our big part of our community died. And many of us in the community are completely taken aback by this because we know he wasn't, he was doing well. He just recovered from a leg amputation and was pretty much good at home. We were expected to see him back on the beach soon. When we got this sad news today. And this really made me reflect on why it's so important to set boundaries and why it's so important to do it now instead of waiting till later. And this is why this topic came to mind while I was sitting here thinking, you know, what can I discuss with our ladies in our community and with your families, everyone who's involved here. So, today, thank you, Curly. So today, um, our agenda will be strategies to set boundaries effectively, challenges and specific solutions, and action planned activity to help you apply what you've learned today. So let's start off with a little bit of a definition. Now, if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. And what we'll try to do is try to answer the questions as we go ahead, but I'd prefer if you leave a lot of questions to the end of the program. Work-life boundaries are physical, mental, and emotional limits we set to protect our personal time and energy. And if you know anything about burnout, burnout is made up of physical, mental, and emotional challenges. Um, on and that leads to eventual too much stress, and eventually your body just feels that it's burnt out. Right? So that's what burnout is. And this is why we are talking about personal, emotional, and mental boundaries. And these boundaries can vary widely, but the goal is to create a balance where both work and personal life can coexist harmoniously without one overshadowing the other. I forgot to ask, is everybody hearing me okay on this session? Give me a thumbs up if you are. All right. I'm gonna assume that some. All right, lovely. Thank you, Anne Marie and Cynthia and Sharon and Kimara. Thank you so much. Right. So let's talk about the types of boundaries first. Then there's physical boundaries. Now that's easy to understand. It's like having a fence in your yard. Having a dedicated workspace at home, such as an office or a designated desk. Using a physical barrier, like closing a door to separate work from personal spaces. Those are considered physical boundaries. And we're getting to why those are important in a moment. Then the next one is time boundaries. These are a little bit harder to set because they're not as physical, right? So time boundaries is setting clear start and end times for your workday, like starting at 9 a.m. and ending at 6 p.m. Implementing no meetings blocks on your calendar for deep work or personal errands. And it's interesting, the other day I was on a live session where I was doing a presentation on time management. And one of the questions asked is by one of the managers was, how do I set boundaries of people coming and asking me all day for something they need for the office that I must answer, right? And we were discussing setting some of those time boundaries. Now, there's emotional boundaries. not letting work frustrations spill over into your personal life. And think about it. Often you come home feeling so overwhelmed and stressed that you can't even find time for your own family to have a conversation or to just sit with friends or take a moment for yourself. Then avoiding over identifying with work tasks or letting your self worth depend on your work performance. I mean, that sounds very, very deep. And it is communication boundaries. And this is setting expectations of when you're available to respond to calls and emails. Uh, Example is not checking emails after 7 p.m., using an out of office reply during vacation or non working hours. So then, what are some of the times, what are some of the signs of unhealthy boundaries? One of them is difficulty switching off from work, feeling resentment or exhaustion, and frequent interruptions during personal time due to work tasks. Right? So does any of those sound familiar to any of you? I think I know for myself, I have had those challenges in the past. Sorry, I'm just scrolling up on my presentation a little bit here. Give me one moment. So let's get into some of the strategies we can then use for setting your work-life boundaries. So here are some practical strategies you could use. Defining clear working hours. Now, I know many of you are thinking, how am I going to define clear working hours? How do we make a line on one of these? So I go back to our parents, our grandparents. Do you remember when they used to go to work in the morning, come home in the afternoon, and that's the end of their day? The rest of the afternoon, they spend with their family, whether it's having dinner, doing homework, doing some activity, but there was a clear cutoff with when work ended and when the family time began. Those lines have been blurred so much in our modern society and in the last few years that it's sometimes hard for us to set those clear boundaries. So for us, we have to now be intentional about how we set those clear boundaries. So on action you can take is set a recurring end of day reminder on your phone is one place you could put it. Set a reminder on your phone of this time, that's where I shut off. So is it 6 p.m.? Is it at a specific time? Is, is it that on the weekends, you set a specific day where you're doing no work related to your job, right? And this reminds you to wrap up and communicate updates and log off. What that means is if you're on a computer, when do I stop? When do I draw that line and say I'm not doing anymore? A good way to do this is use a simple statement in your, like if you're doing emails, my work hours is from 9 to 6 p.m. And here's something about this one when we start setting these work hours boundaries. You might think that people won't respect it, that people will get annoyed, your managers, your bosses, they will get annoyed and say, how can you not work at this time? And some nations like France have gone as far as to make it a part of their law. But here's the thing, when you start setting those boundaries, people start respecting those boundaries. Now, it might not happen immediately, but once they realize that you have a cutoff time and you're setting this clear boundary, they start to say, okay, I understand, and they start to respect that boundary. Now, if you're now starting off in your career, fine. You need to build your career. You need to get into this space of building out what that is. And that is that your work hours might go over. But then at that point in your career, you probably don't have a family, you don't have children, and your responsibilities are basically just your job and taking care of the bills you have, like paying rent. But as you get older, you realize with all these other responsibilities, you really need to set these boundaries. But and your leaders will actually understand, right? Now, the next one we talked about is physical boundaries, right? So that's where you set a time boundary. Physical boundaries are things like creating a clear workspace. Where do you set the cutoff at working from working? So, like for instance, myself and Maria, we tend to work from home doing this stuff for the health for the White Rose community and the healthy reset. So what I have done in my work from home space is I have a dedicated space where when I come in here, that's to do work. I don't do work anywhere else in my house. I don't go in front of the TV or on the dining table, take out my computer and do work while I'm there. Even when I'm home with my children and I am the one in charge when I'm at home, right? I let them come into my office and play in my office where I work from. Instead of me going to them, I have them come with me. I have set that boundary. This has a twofold effect to me. One, it gets me into that work mindset. So I'm like, okay, I'm walking into my office, it's time to do work. All right. The second thing is the rest of the house becomes a non-work space. That means when I work in a space and I walk out of that room, no longer am I set in this space to work again. Right? So I leave the room and that's it. I don't need to be working beyond that point. So that sets a clear boundary. So are you setting boundaries like that? Like for instance, are you bringing homework with you? Are you saying in when you leave the office or you leave your job, are you leaving it in there, setting that boundary of when I get into the car, when I go on to travel home using a taxi or a maxi or whatever you want to use or a bus, do I set that as a cut point where I'm done working? Or do I get on that bus and I'm opening up my phone or my file to continue to work? So setting that boundary is vitally important. And once you do, and I know it's easy for people to communicate with you all the time. And we're going to get to that communication boundary in a second. Because of the access to cell phones and the way we are today, right? So setting that set boundary of where do you work and leaving it only in that space now creates that boundary for you to separate work from your home life, right? And think about so over the next week, think about where can I set those boundaries, right? Now, another method of setting your boundaries is learning to say no. Now, a lot of people say, how can I say no to certain things? And my boss will fire me. There, I will lose my job. But there are techniques to saying no. Saying no can be very difficult, especially in a corporate environment or a high performing work environment where taking on more tasks can seem like the path to success. But you're allowing yourself to say no. Now, here's the thing about saying no. When you say no to so many things happening, you have more time to finish the things that you need to do, the work that you have to do, be given to you, so that you can be more productive at work. So, here's a method to do this. Now, you don't have to say no directly. Like, for instance, when me and Ria started this community earlier that the end of last year, and we started building it, at the beginning of this year, we got an offer by a nonprofit organization who is trying to build their community in Trinidad and Tobago. They're located in the UK and they have a chapter in Trinidad and Tobago. And they were asking us if we would like to join them on helping them to build and also build our community. But we had so many things happening to develop the White Rose community because we were just starting out. We still had a lot of stuff to plan out. We still have the clinic to set up and everything. So we had a ton of stuff on our plates and it was really tempting. And I remember having this discussion with Maria, is it a right fit? Right? And we were very tempted to take up the offer. But here's what I said, I eventually said to Maria, I was like, look, I don't think we are in a space for that. And she absolutely agreed. She said, I was thinking the same thing. The no response I gave was simply this. Hey, I know this is an awesome opportunity and we would love to take it, but we've got so much stuff on our plate right now that we cannot put this on and be effective at it. Can we revisit this in 6 months? And you could do the same thing in your jobs. The thing about deadlines, I always say, is deadlines can always be moved. I tell people I worked as an emergency physician for the first 10 to 12 years of my career. And I could tell you the only emergencies that exist in the real world is coming close to death. Everything else is urgent, and it's always urgent to the person who is presenting it, right? So if you go to somebody with something, your stuff is urgent to you, but not to that person. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that, you have to think to yourself, is this something I can put on my plate now, or is it going to overwhelm me? So setting the boundary by saying no doesn't have to be a direct no. It could be simply, hey, I've got a lot of stuff to do this week. Would you mind if I revisit this in a week's time, in 2 weeks' time? And I've got tons of examples of using this with my bosses. When we started the sports medicine, the joint and muscle clinic in the Cuba Hospital, right? The first of its kind in Trinidad and Tobago, the head of the hospital was asking for me to supply a proposal for the clinic. And I asked him, but he would like it. He's like, can I have it in 2 days? And I started negotiating with him. I was like, do you mind if I give it to you next week? And he goes, no, I need it in at least 4 days. I was like, well, how about if I submit it? And this was like on a Monday, I think. Right. I was like, okay, so how about if I submit it on Friday? He's like, oh, yeah, that's okay. I gave myself an extra 5 days. Did I have the time to do it in 2 days? No. I needed some time to get the stuff together to submit it in a week's time. And I took 5 days. So we renegotiated the boundary on when that would be set. And that's simple ways. And I'm sure all of you could think of multiple ways you could say no without outright saying no, right? You can say it in so many ways. Just have to take a moment and think about it. So here's something I want to add to that. When it comes to saying no, if somebody makes a request of you, take a break, step back and give it a pause. This is really important. And I only learned the idea of using pauses within the last few months. Here's the thing about pauses. People appreciate a pause. Have you ever been on any event or any watch any shows where the person paused and gave a moment for everybody to think, to breathe? When you give a pause, what happens is the person who's asking the request thinks you're really thinking about it hard and you are actually putting a lot of thought in this. And not you're not, you actually are. But this gives you a moment to formulate your response, to say, is this something I need to do now? Is this something I could do later? And it formulate what the no response will be. Right? And there's an excellent book called The Black Swan that talks about with one of sorry, my sinuses are acting up again. It's one of the CIA's top negotiators. He's negotiated hostage situations all over the world. And he talks about the idea of using the no and how effective it is in negotiating. So let's say no is your superpower. It is how you get things done. Any good salesperson will tell you the negotiation starts with the first no. The minute the person is saying yes, 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 yes all the time, you have lost the sale, right? And that goes for just about every form of negotiating. Think of your children. How often do you say no to them? I have a 7 and a 4-year-old. Trust me, I've told them to start calling me Captain No because that's all I do is say no. And now my 7-year-old calls me Captain No. So but they don't give up. They hear the no and they automatically start negotiating for whatever they want, and they will keep it up until you give in or you leave the store. Right? So get into the art of how to say no. Right? Now, the fourth strategy is prioritizing self-care. Why this is important, you'll hear me and Maria and anybody who works with us in the White Rose community talk about why self-care is the most important thing. So think about this. Anybody here have ever went on an airplane or flew before? Thumbs up if you have. Now, I've flown a lot of times in my life. I come from Ghana. I had to get to Trinidad and other places in the world by flying. When you get on a plane and the air hostesses are announcing their safety checks. There's a section of it where they say, in the event of loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will drop from the roof. Put it on yourself before putting it on anybody else. Now, why do they say that? The reason is that if you don't take care of your oxygen first, within 30 seconds, you will faint. And when you faint, everybody else around you gets harmed. So if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the screaming child, of the screaming husband, of the screaming friend next to you, passenger next to you. You can't take care of anybody because everybody is going to faint, and that might be a problem. So they always say, take care of yourself first before taking care of anybody else, because you can't help anybody else unless you take care of you. So this is why prioritizing self-care is so vitally important. If you're not prioritizing your self-care, then how are you able to help anybody else? All right, so your productivity and mental health are directly linked to your well-being. So here's an action you could do. Schedule personal time. Just like you would a work meeting, schedule some time for yourself. 30 minutes for lunch or a daily walk at 3 p.m. For instance, personal time for me is waking up early in the morning and doing 10 minutes of yoga and 8 minutes of journaling. That's that's all I need. I'm good. My energy is ready to go. So schedule in some personal time for yourself. Again, you could use your phone for this. Set up a reminder on your phone to say, hey, this is my personal time. And when you set that reminder, you'll see that once it goes off, your brain automatically switches into time for me. And you step away and you give it a few minutes for yourself, right? Whether it's to sit and meditate and breathe, whether it's to do a little bit of a walk, a little bit of a stretch, get something to eat, set that personal time. And when you set that personal time, I don't suggest going on social media. Don't go on your phone and occupy that time with social media. That is really kind of not adding any personal self-care, right? Set time, like go into nature, go sit in the sun, go sit under a tree, something like that is important for you, right? So prioritize your self-care. Now, we are living in a digital world. So tip number 5 is simply this. If we live in a digital world, we have to set digital boundaries. Here's something interesting I learned within the last 2 years. Do you know there are retreats in the world right now where people go to have their cell phones taken away from them, or they have no internet access so they can get away from the internet? There was something called Zoom burnout during the pandemic, right? Where people just got so overwhelmed and burnt out from using Zoom that they didn't want to get in front of us another video conferencing call for a very long time. So set your own digital boundaries, right? Technology is awesome. It has made us connected as a world. It's offered us access to information at our fingertip. Now we can do so much with it and we can communicate so well. I remember when I was in university in my first degree, In the 90s, I would call my parents once a month, right? Because you got a call on a payphone and it costs you a lot of money to make those long distance calls. Today, with advents of things like WhatsApp, Zoom, and all of these other communication platforms, you can make a call for free anywhere in the world to anybody you want for any period of time. So you could, and you have all these very cool free versions you could use that have limited time, but you just keep recalling every time you get cut off. So it's easy to communicate today, but technology can also be a curse. As much as it connects us, it can also be very harmful. So why is scrolling through social media so addicting? The reason is because when you scroll, you get these little dopamine hits. They make you feel good, but they don't mean anything. They're fleeting. Why? Because your brain makes you feel like you completed something. After you watched a short video, it feels like you've done something. So you go to the next video to feel to feel you accomplished something again. You go to the next one. And what happens is 3, 4 hours later, you realize you've done nothing but look at these videos and realize you've wasted a whole bunch of time and then you feel horrible. So set your digital boundaries. Turn off your phones. Turn off the notifications on your phones. Set on your emails, put a message saying, I check emails at this time every day or twice a week. So everybody knows. At 4 p.m. or at 9 a.m. is when I check my emails, and I will check it between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And I will respond to you during those times on Tuesday and Thursday. So they now know if they email you, they'll get a response on Tuesday and Thursday. And that could be set as an automatic response on your email. You could put on things like the do not disturb to limit your distractions. You can turn off your notifications for a little while. In fact, turn off most of the notifications on your phone. All the social media connections that you have that give you notifications all the time, but just push notifications, take them off. They are just distracting you. And set a boundary of when you will put away your phone and step away from it and not be so connected to it all the time. So another opportunity is consider having a second phone or a profile specifically related to work. So now they only can call you on your work-related phone, and they now know after a certain time, they cannot get you on that phone, no matter what happening in the workplace, right? So those are 5 tips you could use um, to set your boundaries. So let's recap them really quickly, right? The first one is define your clear working hours. When do you have a start time? When you have a cutoff time? The second one is create a dedicated workspace, whether at home, whether at work, and step away from that workspace so that you know when you leave that workspace, there's nothing happening that's related to work. Another one is the third tip is learn to say no. Your superpower is no. So learn how and learn creative ways to say no. And if you don't know how to say no right away, take a pause, take a moment, take a deep breath, and then formulate your response so you can say it. Next one is prioritizing self-care. Number 4, prioritize self-care, very important. And lastly, number 5, set digital boundaries. So you know when to shut off your time spots. So then, what are some of the common challenges and how do you overcome them? So some of the common challenges you're going to face when setting boundaries are, first one is pressure to be always available. So thumbs up if everybody expects you, like you're at work and they always expect you to be available. You must have your phone on you. You must be available to everybody. If you feel that way, here's how you can deal with that challenge. Set, as we began earlier, one of the boundaries set was setting the communication boundary, right? Of making your phone, like getting a second phone or setting a communication boundary of a response that you will respond when necessary. The other day I was talking to one of the a lady who wanted to join my weight loss course in Mount Hope in Eric Williams where I work. And when I sent her a message about the course and what is required to do it and where she can find it, I got a response saying that she is not available right now, an auto response, she's not available right now, but she will respond to the message at a later time. That was really cool, right? Because I just spoke to her like 2 minutes before and I sent her a message while I was talking to her, and that's the response I got. That is a boundary. Another a challenge you may face is blurred lines when working from home, right? How do you separate that space? As I said, one is setting a physical space, a physical workspace where you can work from that physical space itself. Another one is create a ritual to start and end your day. So your ritual can be like taking a walk before start working, or and close off with a similar activity. One of the rituals I use is the Pomodoro principle, where I set a timer on my phone for 25 minutes and I take a 5 minute break. And I keep that up within a certain space of time. So I have a limitation of how much time I will spend on work when I'm working from home. And it's usually between 3 to 6 hours, depending on the day and how busy it is. So I set up the Pomodoro. So every 25 minutes, I then take a 5 minute break and I keep repeating that until I've completed most of my tasks. Right? Challenge number 3, fear of missing out or falling behind. So thumbs up if you have the fear of missing out. Everything needs to be done right now. I can't, if I don't do it, I'm gonna miss something in this life. So here's how you deal with that. Focus on quality of work rather than quantity. Right? I always say work smart, not hard. And there's tons of ways to work smart, not hard. Artificial intelligence have made it to be even better at working smarter and not harder. And there's tons of ways you can use that. Like for instance, I was expecting us to have a speaker tonight and she couldn't show. So I had to go and create a whole new introduction for this session. And I went on ChatGPT. So when I told you, give me a second, I'm just doing something really quickly, I went to ChatGPT and asked it to write me an introduction really quickly so I can come and present it. Now, I didn't present exactly that introduction. I went through it. I quickly was going through it. And as I was reading through it, I realized some parts of it I didn't like. So I left those out and added my own. So I was able to quickly respond to the speaker not showing, right? So fair method, focus on quality work, not quantity, right? Challenge number 4, managing guilt when enforcing your boundaries. So I'm sure many are thinking, yeah, but I'm gonna feel guilty about doing this. Do a reframe. Instead of feeling guilty, reframe it in your mind. I'm respecting you're respecting your own needs and values, right? So reframe in your mind how you would focus on those of getting rid of the guilt. By setting this boundary, I'm ensuring that I can be more effective tomorrow and more effective on my job, right? So just like the Pomodoro principle works, because by taking that 5 minute break, you're able to reset your brain and get ready for the next 25 minutes of work. You can do the same by saying, I'm not guilty for doing this, but I'm doing this because I respect my needs and values, and it makes me more effective in what I need to do. Right? So now we're getting close to the end of this session. So let's then dive into creating a personal plan, right? So how do you create a personal plan to set your boundaries? Create an action plan template, right? And so here's how you do it. Identify a boundary issue. And if you go on our YouTube channel, I have to redo the show notes on the YouTube channel. But I will add a tool I use for creating a personal plan. You can go download it from there, right? That will be up by before the end of this week. See what I did there? I know I couldn't do it tomorrow. I know I can't do it tonight because after I'm finished with this, I'm stepping away and that is my evening is done. I'm not going to look back at this work. Tomorrow, I have too much to do, so I cannot do it tomorrow. So I set the boundary by saying, hey, the expectation is I will have it done by the end of the week, and I will go and redo the description so I can put in that personal plan document, and you guys can now find it at the end of the week on the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is the Healthy Reset, right? And if you guys don't know where to find that, I'll post it here quickly for you. So you can go on the Healthy Reset and find, let me post it in the chat, and find this video. And we'd love for you to go on the Healthy Reset and like, share, and join our community so we can continue to give you our best and grow our channel to reach more women. So let's get into creating a personal plan. First, identify the boundary issue. For example, I'm constantly checking my email after work, or I'm constantly bringing homework with me. Then you set a specific goal. It must be realistic. I will stop checking emails after 7 p.m. Or I will not bring homework with me today, right? And I will get it in the morning, right? Now, outline your strategy. For instance, if you're getting calls often from your workplace, especially after you leave work, put a do not disturb on there on your phone saying, I am not available after this time. Like the lady who put on her phone a response of, I'm not available at this moment and I will respond to you as soon as possible. You can put something like that. I am not available right now and I will respond to this message within the next 24 hours. All right. One of the things another strategy is communicate. I won't respond to messages after a certain time, right? So communication is key here. Once you're clear on that communication, people learn to respect that boundary. Anticipate challenges and find solutions. No, I always say there's always going to be challenges. That's what makes us thrive. So as you identify a challenge, write it down, right? And instead of feeling anxious about that challenge, right? Or about missing something important, simply say, was this absolutely important now? Was it something I needed to address now? Or is it something I can address later? Right? Is it something I needed to say yes to right away? Or is it something I can say no to and put it for a later time? Right? One of the things we mentioned earlier is using auto replies. We have technology, so you have access to tons of auto replies now. As Matri said, the technology is there and those features are available to you, but many of us don't use them because we always feel that we are violating other people's trust by not using them. And that is entirely not true, right? So key takeaways I want you guys to have this evening. Set boundaries. This is not an easy practice to implement, but what I always suggest is start with one thing. Set a boundary on one thing you want to change. Where is like for instance, I stop working at a certain time in the evening. I start working at this time in the morning, right? And set that boundary. And until that boundary, when you set that time, you don't start getting to work mode at that time. And I can tell you, over a week to two, your brain will switch on to work mode as soon as it hits that time. You realize you're much more productive because you've set that space of creating that work mode. Excuse me, right? You, your managers, if you're a manager, you're a leader in your organization, you're an employee, you all play a role in creating a healthy work-life balance. So it's interesting. I encountered a picture the other day, which I thought was really cool. And let me see if I can find it really quickly and I'll show it to you guys. That I thought was excellent for talking about boundaries. And I'll find the image in a moment. I'm going to share this image here and show you what I mean. So as we talk about setting boundaries and creating that positive environment, everybody seeing this? Thumbs up if you are. Now, does this resonate with you? Here is a person who's happy, and he walks into a place where everybody is sad, angry, or feeling not up to par. And over time, you notice that it starts to spread. The happiness goes on and on. And it's interesting because I've used this technique in the past with some of my clients. I had one young lady who couldn't get along with her co-worker, and for years they were at each other's back. The co-worker was constantly trying to sabotage her her work, right? And make her look bad in front of her manager. And here's the interesting about that relationship. Before they've had a falling out, and she didn't know what the falling out was. They were very good friends. So I told her, I was like, look, instead of trying to change the person, why don't you do something for them? Why don't you, every day when you go into work, just think to yourself, I want this person to be happy. And you should try it if you want. Just share happiness. You don't have to tell the person you're doing this, right? You just think it in your head. I want this person to be happy. And you could do it with anybody. And you could do it with a random person if you want. And here's something interesting that happened. She came into my office 3 weeks later and she was so excited. She was jumping off the walls, how excited she was. And she's like, I have to share this with you, Dr. Z. She says that just that day, the coworker came up to her and they had a long conversation about what was going on in her life. And she came to find out that this lady had had a great loss in her life and had a lot of ups and downs and was really bringing her down. And she didn't say anything to her for the 3 weeks. All she did every day was share that she wanted her to be happy. She thought it in her head. And over that time, that person started loosening up and eventually opened up to her. So, yes, happiness is contagious. So, your well-being at work is important and you contribute to the work-life balance by creating a healthy work-life balance for yourself, which translates to everybody else in you becoming better and manage their work-life balance. Right? So as I said, implement one boundary at a time. Don't try to implement all of these boundaries at the beginning. Just implement it one at a time. So remember, I see Maria had her hand up, right? So Maria, I'll take a question in a sec. Remember, setting boundaries is an act of self-respect and a commitment to your own well-being, right? Now, does anybody have any questions at this point in time? Maria, fire away. Let's hear what your question is.
I wanted to let you know that you had cut off for a while, and the story that you were telling about the person who was happy and was spreading the joy, a big piece of that I missed out because
Okay.
the video cut. So if you could
Did
continue.
did that cut for everybody or just for Maria? Because I know Maria were dropping off and coming back on. So the story is, I'll repeat it. The coworker that she was having a problem with, eventually came to her after a few weeks of doing it and was super open and was able to sit down and share what was going on to her life and why they were in such a state. Right. And that led to her now developing a better relationship with her coworker. And all that came from was her thinking, this person, I want this person to be happy every day. And the moral of that story is that happiness can be contagious, right? And it can spread. You know, like when somebody yawns, everybody else starts to yawn, right? The same thing happens with happiness. If you're constantly smiling, people around you start to smile also. Why? They don't know why you're happy, but it's so contagious that they can't help it, but feel your happiness and want to share in it, right? Are there any questions at this point in time about setting boundaries?
So that, that
Mary, I can't hear you.
clear and informative. Really things that we need to
That's it,
set.
yeah.
Really things that we need to set. So it was just so clear. I thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And this is important for all the women in here who are also going through menopause. Setting these boundaries allows you to really prioritize self-care. And when those moments where you're feeling overwhelmed and nothing seems to be working, when you set those boundaries, it makes it easier to manage the situations. And once you communicate how those boundaries are set, you then see that it makes it that managing the symptoms of menopause can become very much more a bit easier. Are there any other questions before we close off tonight?
I just wanted to make a comment
Yes, of course.
on how important it is on saying no, right? And it really is a superpower because when you say no, many times it separates the sheep from the goat. Because there are some people that just want to hang around you because you are to them, they can they can manipulate you easily because they can get to they're not saying no, so it's easy. You are easy prey. But when you say no, it shows a level of character that I need to take it a little easy with this person, yes. They know what they're about. And no is very important word, especially now during menopause, when we as women see about everybody, and many times we neglect ourselves. And when we start to say no and start to see about our own well-being, we make a lot of enemies, and many times it comes from our own family members. So saying no is very important at this time. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes, thank you for that, Maria. No is your superpower. And if you use it effectively, it can be very good at empowering not only yourself, but the people around you into respecting your boundaries. All right.
Night.
Nice, Liz. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi, Doc. Hi, Nurse. You know, I
Night,
was just
night.
I was just able, thank you. I was just able to pick up the last 15 minutes of the program. And I understand the concept based on what I heard from Dr. Kang. Now, ladies, we must understand too, and gents, we must understand that what we could have done many years ago, we can't do it no more. We may have been able to multitask without doing a checklist, right? But we can't do that no more. I will say checklist, and I would analyze that to be the same kind of description of what Dr. Z was saying. It is, similar, if not the same. So, yes, we need to have that organization. We are not young anymore, as young as before, right? So we need to be like that, because eventually it will confuse us. Yeah, and we will be very anxious and angry with ourselves. That's my little contribution.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Liz.
You're welcome.
Very true. All very true. All right. So I implore everyone, go to our YouTube channel, hit like, share, comment, watch the videos, subscribe to the channel so you'll get the updates on when new things are happening on the channel. This helps us to grow and reach more women who are in need, and to grow the channel so that YouTube will then start sharing our small channel with the wider community in the world and in the Caribbean, so that we can have a bigger reach and help more women navigate menopause and really provide value in this world of women's health. All right. Thank you so much for everyone for coming. We look forward to having you next week. Oh, next week, we're not having a session next week. So yes, the 22nd, we won't be having a session next week, but we'll be back on the 29th of October with our next session, and I will post it of what's up. If you check on the YouTube channel, you'll see it usually a few days before I'll post it, if not a week before. I'll post up what the next video is coming up with the description and everything, so you have, and then you'll get an update of when that is happening. Yep. So enjoy your evening, everyone, and we will see you. If you want to come hike with us on Sunday, we'll probably do Mount St. Benedict's again. We'll post it in the WhatsApp group. All right. Anyway, have a pleasant week and enjoy the rest of your time. All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.